We're going to read from the Bible now, from a portion of that ancient letter that was written to a city in modern-day Greece. And so you'll find a red Bible somewhere around you, hopefully. Please do turn in it. Page 1179. The reading will follow what Steve read to us that bit earlier at the beginning of our service. That's page 1179. And we're going to read from Philippians 2, verses 12 to 18. So that's the big number 2 and the little 12 to 18, with the heading, Do Everything Without Grumbling. I'll just wait for you to turn there. That's page 1179. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. This is God's word. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. And let me add my welcome. It's lovely to have you with us this morning at City Gates. And if it's your first time, again, it is great to have you here. Keep that passage open. We're going to be looking at it together. And I just want to say, look at this image on the screen. And I wonder, what do you see when you see this image? For you at home, you'll be hearing a number of people saying stars. Actually, when you look at this image, you're probably looking at 85% darkness. There are obviously some blue bits in there as well, but it is darkness. But what is our eye drawn to? It's the stars. You know, they kind of give everything else shape, and you just can't but look at them. Have a look at Philippians chapter 2, and have a look at the end of verse 15. And look at how it describes what the people of God should be like. He says this, then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. Paul is saying here that there is something different about knowing and following Jesus. It compares to looking like a star in the sky. Now, I'm aware in this room there will be a whole mixture of people. Some of you some of you follow Jesus, you know him. Some of you wouldn't call yourself Christians, or maybe you're not Christians. And I wonder, just think about, whoever you are, what first brought you along to church? What first brought you along to church? Now, there'll be a whole host of reasons. Maybe it was your friends and family of maybe being dedicated, and that's what's brought you along to church. It may be that you were brought up in a home of churchgoers and you were brought along to church. But for others of us here, it may be there was someone in your life that you thought that you shine a little bit differently to the other people that I'm around. Maybe that's why you're here today. Maybe you think it's your spouse, or a mate on the team, or somebody who you met at the school gate, or maybe a work colleague, and you thought they're just a little bit different. It's not that they get things always right, but they were going through that hard time, and they didn't end up in complete pit of despair, or maybe they were just in the workplace with you, and they were just genuinely kind, and they were not kind to get something out of you. They just wanted to help. Maybe you just felt there was something you'd come across that you hadn't seen before, and you were intrigued. They were a little bit like a star in the sky. Not they were perfect, not they were free from difficulty, but they were intriguing. Now, I guess that might be part of many of our stories here today. And again, I want to say, if that's the reason why you're here today, I hope you'll see that The reason why there is a difference is because of the person of Jesus. And for loads of us who are following Jesus here today, I hope to remind you that actually God is calling you to live out his good purposes by which you will shine like a star in the darkness. And I think there's three things from this passage that Paul kind of highlights for this church. And the first thing is this: God is at work in you, so work it out. God is at work in you, so work it out. Now, if you've been around here since the start of the series, I've been talking about this every single week, and I'm going to talk about it again, that if you're someone who has trusted in Jesus, you are a gospel citizen. You're a citizen of heaven. Jesus has made you part of his eternal kingdom. And trusting in Jesus, that should shape your identity and purpose and everything about your life. Just have a look at verse 12 of chapter 2. Paul writes this: therefore, and he's kind of saying, in the light of everything I've been telling you about your identity, about the humble service of Jesus, what are they to do as gospel citizens? Have a look on. My dear friends, verse 12, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation. He says, what are they to do as citizens of heaven? Work out your salvation. Now, when he's writing this, I don't know what the first century version of the gym was, but I think he had that in his mind. I used to live in Worcester before we moved over to Norwich, and I used to be a member of a gym. I know you can't tell. And I used to remember there was a running machine that I'd go on, and this was a gym that the Worcester Warrior professional rugby team, they used to go and train in this gym. And there was a Tongan, a South Sea Islander, who was he was built. He was very fit. And as I was pootling on the running machine, he would be next to me. And I don't know if you've been in a gym where people are like putting it at a really high pace, and they're charging, and they put their feet out and don't go off, and then they go back on. He was doing all this. He was sweating buckets. I basically had a bead going down my head as I was looking at him. And Paul has in his mind the South Sea Islander rather than Andy Rees pootling at the gym, because actually the Greek word has a sense of that word for work. It's achieving by toil and labor. It's actually doing something. It's expending energy on it. And Paul here in verse 12 says to this church, they are to work out, they are with toil and hard labor, their salvation. Now let's be clear what he's not saying here. Okay, he's not saying they are to work for their salvation. There's loads of religions in the world that say you need to work to be saved. So Islam will say you need to obey God enough so when you meet him, when you die, he will weigh up your good deeds versus your bad. And if you've been good enough, you'll get into what they say is heaven. Or Buddhism will say good karma, you need to kind of live wholesome and ethical actions, and maybe when you die you might come back as a prince. Or if you haven't been so good and you've got bad karma, maybe you'll come back as a rat. But the point being, whatever world religion you look at, it is work for their version of salvation. But that is not what Christianity says. It's not what Jesus says. You are not to work for your salvation. You are to work out your salvation. No, you could never work for your salvation. You're never going to be good enough. God's standard is perfection, and none of us can earn his kingdom. We have to accept it as a gift from the perfect life and the sacrificial death of Jesus. You trust Jesus, you are rescued by him, you're not working for the salvation, but he does say we need to work it out. We need to work out what it means. We need to live in the light of it. We need to pray and think about what it means. Now, there's a wonderful, glorious tension in verses 12 and 13. A wonderful, glorious tension, because he says you need to work it out, but God is working in you in tandem to help you do it. Just have a look at verse 13. Verse 12, he says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. He says, as you're working out your salvation, God really is trying to work in you to live that out. Now, just have a look again at verse 13, because it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because actually, end of verse 12, he says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Fear and trembling. Now, what does he mean by that? He is not meaning that I need to work really hard at trying to follow Jesus, because if I don't, God might kick me out. No. I'm not accepted because of my performance, ever. It's just Jesus. The language of fear and trembling, actually, it's imagery that is used in the Old Testament. If you were here at the church, it was last year, we did some teaching in the book of Exodus. And in the book of Exodus, for those of you who don't know, God rescues his people from slavery in Egypt. He takes them through the wilderness, and eventually it takes about 40 years for them to get to the promised land. But on their way, they stop off at Mount Sinai, where God gives his people the law, the Ten Commandments, and he sort of makes them officially his people, as it were. He enters into covenant with them. And as he does that, the imagery are God's people at the bottom of this mountain. Moses is up the top of the mountain, but this mountain is sort of subsumed by lightning and thunder, and the cloud comes down. It's like a special presence of the Lord. And as they look at this mountain, God's people are terrified. They don't even want to touch it because they fear they will die, because God is so holy and righteous and so unlike them. Now, we are not in the Old Covenant. We're not in the first half of the Bible. We're in the New Covenant. We come to our holy and righteous God, but through Jesus we come to him as our Father. We come to him as the one who will never kick us out and never reject us. See, what is going on with this language of fear and trembling? I wonder whether it makes more sense when you think about it in the context of what we've just been reading in chapter 2. See, the new life we have been given has been given to us at a great cost. Now, I was using ChatGPT this week, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's artificial intelligence. And I asked it some questions. I found out some of the questions I asked for last week's sermon, it was not precisely accurate. Some of the stuff I said last week wasn't precisely right, but it was roughly right. But this week, so this might be wrong, what I'm saying. This bit might be wrong, so you might fact check it and go, ChatGPT got this wrong. But I wanted to know which was the most expensive countries in the world to become a citizen of. And obviously you can become a citizen of somewhere after living there for a certain time and you apply for citizenship. In third place, so it's the most expensive place in the world to become a citizen, apparently is Britain. There we go. And apparently it costs about £5,000 once you get all the legal fees and the bits and pieces, become a citizen and get a British passport. Number 2, if you're not naturally if you're not naturally brought up there, as it were, if you're kind of wanting to join this place. Apparently 2 is Switzerland, and it costs about 12.5k if you're not initially born in Switzerland. And the most expensive place is Austria, which is £27,500. It's a lot of money, isn't it? You've lived there, you've paid the money. Imagine you get your Austrian passport and you think, oh, skiing or whatever. What are Austrians good at? Skiing. What are they big on? I don't know. Like cheese dips things? I don't know. What? Waltzes. Oh, all those waltzing. Polka. Do they do polka? No. But you're like, you get your Austrian passport. And and you get your residency and you're not going to leave. And how are you going to treat that, particularly if it's cost you £27,500? You're going to be like, oh, this is, I am chuffed with this. I'm not going to treat this lightly. Do you know what it costs for you to become a citizen of heaven? Not money, but the most precious person in all the universe. The eternal Son of God. He left the glory of heaven. He took on our flesh. He lived the life we could never live. He pays with his own blood so that you could be part of his kingdom. Do you know how loved you are? See, to be part of his eternal kingdom, it's something no one could ever buy, but it's only what the eternal Son of God could give. And he does it for you because he loves you. And so to belong to him, to be part of this kingdom, well, money can't buy it. And so I wonder, as you are working out your salvation with fear and trembling, you are just remembering, wow, this has been given to me at a cost. I shouldn't treat this lightly. This is not just another thing about me. This really is the most important thing about me. See, what does God do as we remember what it costs for us to become part of his eternal kingdom? Verse 13, he works in us to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. He gives us both the desire and the power to live it out. The project, the work that he's done in our life as he calls us to him, the good work that he starts in us, he will bring to completion. And God himself works in us to prick our conscience, to give us the urge that I actually need to do something here. That when he saved me, he doesn't just want to leave me there. He wants me to grow and grow in maturity. He wants me to grow and grow in what? Just have a look at the end of verse 13. He wants to will and act in you in order to fulfill his good purpose. He's got good for you. He really does. And so as we reflect on that reality, this sort of dual work, God works in us. So we are to work it out. What are we to do? Just again, verse 12, you are to work out your salvation. In other words, every single person in this room, it will look different for us as we seek to follow Jesus where we currently are. That work that Jesus has done with us, it never finishes, not until glory. And actually at every stage in life, you get a new set of circumstances where you need to think, what does it look like for me at this point to live trembling, fearfully, thankfully as a kingdom, as a member of the kingdom? You know, I just think as I've gotten older, I've just been given more and more responsibility in lots of different ways. And so I've therefore got more and more opportunity to sin against a whole bunch of people. And at each stage, I need to work out right now, what does it mean for me to work at my salvation? You know, being a gospel citizen isn't just about 2 hours on a Sunday. It's not about just serving on the door once a week, done my job. It's 24/7. As the family situation that I have, with the work colleague that I have, with the job situation I have, with the housing and health and responsibilities, and the fact I'm going on that business trip, and how am I going to be there, and as I enter retirement, or my health is declining, or as I go into that shop to buy those clothes, as I'm to work out my salvation. And to work out what it looks like to be a gospel citizen saved by Jesus with an eternal mindset that cares about the eternal needs of others. Now, I used this illustration in the first service. I'm going to use it again. I'm going to tell you where it's wrong. In December this year, Marcus Rashford, if you don't know, he's an England football player. Well, actually, he's not really making it to the national squad at the moment. But December this year, he played for Manchester United. And in January this year, something changed. This changed. Okay? And for those of you who don't know, that's not just a different haircut. He now plays for a team called Aston Villa. Now, what happens as Marcus Rashford plays for Aston Villa and they play against Manchester United? What is he going to do? His allegiance has fundamentally changed. And so he's not going to try and score goals for Manchester United. Why? Because who he is has changed. He's going to try and score goals for Aston Villa because he's got a new identity, a new purpose. Now, the problem with this is, someone came and told me halfway through, apparently he's just on a loan deal. Which means he's not allowed to play Manchester United. Did you know that? No. So basically the illustration falls to pieces. But you get the idea. Jesus has loved me. He has given me a new identity. And I need to work at it. You know, I just like every relationship, the relationship with my wife. I need to work at it. I need to keep working at it because things change and, maybe I haven't spoken to her. I don't know. Just, you need to keep working at it. We were in the garden on Saturday. On Saturday. And I was looking at the back, and I don't know if you're privileged enough to have a garden. Right at the back of the garden, there's always a bit that you don't really do a lot of gardening in, and right at the back of our garden, there's one of those bits. And I was amazed as I saw, we kind of have these garden incinerator things, and there was a lid of a garden incinerator, which we'd clearly left from last year. And in it, a massive thistle had grown up through the center of this hole. And I was like, how did that get there? It's called living in a fallen world. But there's a garden, and you kind of need to keep working at it. Otherwise, it just becomes a mess. And as a citizen of heaven, you've got to keep working at it. Relationship with Christ, how are you going to do that? Keep coming and sitting under God's word, because God will minister to us and challenge us and encourage us as we meet together. I love this. Look at chapter 3. Look at chapter 3 and verses 16 and 17. How do we work out our salvation? 16 and 17 of chapter 3. He says this, "Oh, let us live up to what we have already attained." Do you notice it? You're a gospel citizen. Live up to who you already are. Verse 17, "Join together in following my example, brothers and sisters." So Paul says, follow my example, and you get his example. We get the example of Christ. You will also get next week when Reg preaches, he's preaching on the next passage, you'll get the example of Epaphroditus and Timothy. But he says, look what he says, verse 17, "And just as you have us as a model, an example, a model, keep your eyes on those who live as we do." Keep your eyes on those who live as we do. How do you know what it is to follow Jesus, and how do you work it out? He says, keep your eyes on other Christians who are working it out. Keep your eyes on those who live like we do, who you're like, wow, you really do mean it, that you're a gospel citizen, you're loved and secure, and you're trying to work that out in your life, and maybe there's things I can learn for you. I just want to say there'll be things happening in people's lives in this room today that you'll be feeling utterly despairing about, and you'll be thinking, I do not know how to follow Jesus in this, and I'm even doubting Jesus in this, and I don't know what to do with this. And what you need to know is that there'll be people in this room who have been there, who have experienced it, who will be able to testify to Jesus' faithfulness in the midst of it. And sometimes you just need to be open with those struggles, with that sin, with that doubt, with that difficulty, with that challenging boss, with that stuff that's just challenging in your marriage or with your home or whatever it may be, because there'll be other people here who, if they haven't been through it, they will be able to walk with you in the midst of it. See, Paul here is saying, how do I know what it is to work out my salvation? I don't just do it on my own, I do it with the church. I had an email this week from someone who's been in the church for a few years, and it was a brilliant email. It was so encouraging as they were talking about how different ministries have helped them in their walk with the Lord. But one of the things that jumped out at me from this email was them saying, look, I came a youngish Christian, and I love my small group Bible study. And he said this, because I love watching other people as they follow Jesus, because from them I learn what it actually looks like. Church family, you don't realize how significant you are in other people's lives. Now look, I know this first point is really long. The next 2 points are really short. But I do want to say one more thing, and it's a side point, but I just think it's really helpful to make. Just look again at verse 12. Look at him. He says, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence. Here is Paul. He shared the gospel with them. He's most likely about to die. And he's modeled to them. He's shown them what it looks like to follow Jesus and to know his love and to live eternally and sacrificially for the sake of the lost. And what he's saying here is that your obedience, your walk with the Lord, shouldn't be dependent on me. It is your walk with Jesus. Do you see that? Not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence. It's not about me, it's about your walk with Jesus. And this is just for a few of us. Maybe you've grown up in a Christian family, and just think about it. Do you only obey when your parents are around? Or do you think, it's actually time for me to work this out? Or maybe you're married and you know you're the younger Christian in the marriage. And are you only keen when your spouse is around, or are you there going, no, I need to work this out myself? Or maybe someone in the church met up to study the Bible with you, and they were just instrumental in you becoming a Christian, and they walked with you, but now they've moved city, or maybe they've just had to start meeting with someone else because there's someone else who wants to become a Christian and they want to know what it means. And you need to know that your faith is not dependent on them. You need to keep working it out. It's God who works in you. You're not on your own. His Spirit will never leave you. He urges, but actually there's a step where you need to say, Lord, maybe right now you just think, I don't have the desire. I'm a complete state. And you just need to say, Lord, I claim the prayer of verse 13. I know you work in me. And I pray you'll give me the desire to keep working this out. So there is the first and very long point. And the rest is really short, right? God's work is in you, so work it out. Secondly, 14:16, God's light is in you, so don't dim it. And again, I just want to say, look at verse 16. He's saying to them, as you hold firmly to the word of life, and then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. And here is not Paul going, I'm not sure they're actually going to be saved. No, they're absolutely secure. He's just concerned for them that they do work out the good purposes, that they are fruitful in their relationship with the Lord. That in verse 15, they shine among them like stars in the sky. In other words, that God's people are meant to live out their faith in the world. We're not meant to be inward looking. We're not really meant to be here setting up an Amish community, although as many times I really want to be setting that up. But actually he's saying as God's people, we are meant to live out there for Jesus. What are they to do? Verse 16, hold firmly to the word of life. And again, the Greek here, it could be taken two ways. Holding on, it could also be translated holding out. Holding on, holding out. And I kind of want to say, I like them both. It's a bit ambiguous. So let's say it's both. What are you to do? How do you shine like a star in the sky? You hold on to the word of life. We don't believe this is the word of death. We believe this is God's word that makes sense of life, that gives us life in Jesus. It makes sense of the world. We hold on to it, we believe it, and as there is a matching up between what we believe and as we live, we will hold out this word of life to others. And actually many others will come and find the hope that we have in Jesus. It's really striking. We hold on, we live it out, we hold it out. And what is the really striking thing about one of our distinctives in the world? It's one of my least favorite verses in the Bible. Just look at verse 14. Oh, I just don't like it. What does he say? What does it look like to hold on, to hold out? Well, let's start with this. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Really? What about do some things without grumbling or arguing? Because if you knew what my boss was like, then that would be an exception. If you knew how annoying my neighbours were and the fact they didn't put the bins out at the right time, they leave them out for a couple of days and their garden is a complete mess. He says, no, do everything. Do everything without grumbling or arguing so that in this warped world you will shine like stars in the sky. Now, look, again, I just want to say, he's not saying you shouldn't lament great harm in your life or weep over sorrow, and not saying you can't disagree, but we all know when we are grumbling. We know when we're complaining in a discontented way. And again, it's imagery from the Old Testament. God's people saved from Egypt, saved from slavery, on their way to the promised land. And they spent most of their time in the wilderness saying, I wish we were in slavery back in Egypt. And in essence, they were saying, God, you are not good. God, you gave us this leader, Moses, and he's an idiot. And you're leading us in the desert, and we were better when we were slaves. And he says, for the Christian person, do everything without grumbling. It's a long way, isn't it, to the promised new heavens and new earth. And life can be very tough. And actually, my heart is prone to discontent. Tell you what, I grumble even about my own church leadership. So many things to grumble about. So many things to really get in an argument about. And he says, no, that is warped. It's crooked. Because you're forgetting that you have a good God who will not leave you in this moment, who will help you even in the challenges you are facing. And as you do that, as you are grateful rather than grumble, you will be different. Man, just the school staff room when I used to teach, man, we were a ven of vipers. Wow. We were probably that as well. We were just the way we'd complain about the head teacher and the temptation to get in, because sometimes he was a Burke. Don't grumble. Don't be argumentative. Shine like a light. Live out who you are, accepted, loved, forgiven. Offer the word of life. And offer our lives in joyful sacrifice. That's 17 to 18. And we're not going to look at it. But I do want to say true joy isn't found in me clinging on to my life. It's found in giving it away for others. That's kind of what Paul says in verses 17 and 18. And I just want to say the happiest Christians I know aren't the ones that have the easiest lives. They're the ones who pour out their lives in love for others. So, work it out. Work it out. And maybe you're not a Christian here today. You need to come and find out who Jesus is, because he is worth following. We're just going to bow our heads now. I'll just give you some moments to respond in your heart, in your mind. As you want to say thank you, Jesus, for the preciousness of your salvation.